We live at the most dangerous period in world history. I was in a war for 20 months, and I know no one wins any war. I believe there's going to be a stock market crash between now and the end of October. The opportunity, not of a lifetime, I think it's the opportunity of a 100-year span.
Okay, guys, so today we have for the first time ever Bob Moriarty on our show. Sir, thank you very much for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I would like to begin our conversation by talking about the US economy. So we have so much going on right now with the Fed, with Trump putting pressure on the Fed, recent economic data. So what's your take, Bob, on what's happening with the US economy right now?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's like looking at an iceberg, okay? When you look at an iceberg, 10% is above water, and you could see that, and 90% is below the surface. And the same thing is true. We are in a recession slash depression right now. There are little time bombs going off all over the world. The Japanese bond market has crashed. The U.S. bond market crashed. Chinese bond market crashed. I had some good data on that today. Interest rates are going up. And quite bluntly, Trump scares me because other than real estate, he doesn't understand anything about economics. And the idea that the president of the United States should be selling cellular telephones and cologne and perfume is bizarre to me, and telling football teams that they need to change their names. Uh, Donald Trump's totally out of control. The people that he has surrounding him are not top notch, and I think they're giving him bad information. Some of the stuff he is demanding the Fed lower interest rates, and he's betting his own money at the same time. Trump has bought $100 million worth of bonds. And of course, if interest rates go down, the value of the bonds go up. But to the extent that I am a believer in laissez-faire capitalism, and the very best economy is an economy with the least amount of government intervention. There's going to be an interesting meeting on Friday, tomorrow, in Wyoming, where the Fed chairman is going to talk about interest rates. And Donald Trump is putting more pressure on him than he has on any Fed in history. But if you look at the unemployment and giant companies are laying off tens and hundreds of thousands of people, the underpinnings, the 90% that is underwater that we can't see, suggests that very bad times are coming. Now, the cryptocurrencies have recently hit all-time highs, the Dow, the S&P, the Nasdaq, and of course, avalanches always start from the top of the mountain. Okay, so I believe that there's going to be some catastrophe between now and the end of October, but all of the pieces are in place for a very dangerous economy. And quite bluntly, the European Union is in worse shape than the United States is.
Yes, we certainly have a lot going on. And sir, what would be your view on the US dollar right now at the current levels and in the current situation?
Every country whose currency becomes the world's reserve currency has a lifespan of about 80 to 82 years. And of course, we're 81 years now. It has to do with the nature of man. The very best book on what's going on globally right now is a book written in 1999 called The Fourth Turning. And the fourth turning, it's 20 or 21 years is a turning. The fourth turning is a crisis phase, and we clearly are in the crisis stage now. Because of the actions of Biden and Trump, countries around the world are bailing out of the US dollar, and it's extremely dangerous. There is one company that has taken a giant position, a leverage position in Bitcoin that threatens the entire $4 trillion Bitcoin house. And should Bitcoin go below $111,000, okay, it could bring down the financial system. Now, that was a foolish thing for the government to allow in the future or in the past, but I don't see a good prospect for the future of the dollar. There is a conflict going on between the debt-based system of the West and the resource-based system of the East and the South. The debt-based system has been in place and in power since 1492, and it clearly is declining. When you look at the leadership of Europe, okay, they're a bunch of midgets, okay? You've got a bunch of chihuahuas running around, threatening everyone in the world, and they're not leaders, okay? They're followers. So the future of the dollar, I don't think is good. It's not going to disappear any more than the British pound disappeared. But the British pound was dethroned in the 1930s, and it's been a relatively minor, meaningless currency since then. The Chinese are doing some interesting things where they're setting up gold depositories in foreign countries, and you were allowed to transact in either Chinese yuan or gold. And that effectively is monetizing gold. So I think the future of money is going to have some kind of gold backing. And the Chinese made it clear they do not want to be a world reserve currency. But the United States has had a free ride for 80 years, and it's just about over.
And it looks like even the European central bankers, at least in some countries, are also getting more interested in gold. Like we've seen that happen with Poland. But so we recently seen the crypto and the US government sort of getting closer. What's your take on that whole situation?
The interesting thing there is I'm going to disagree a slight bit with what you said. It isn't really the U.S. government, even though that's the visible part. It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump and his family have literally made billions of dollars moving assets into cryptocurrencies, supporting cryptocurrencies. I think in hindsight, we're going to look at the Trump administration and realize Donald Trump has literally pimped out the presidency. Some of the things, when he made that trip to the Middle East, that had more of a sales pitch for the Trump companies, okay, than representing the United States government. Some of the stuff like going to countries and saying, well, why don't you give me your $400 million airplane? That was just simply wrong. It was obscene. Now, are you aware that in the 24 hours before Donald Trump took office, he came out with that meme coin, the Donald Trump meme coin? That was bizarre because I don't think it would be legal for him to do it as president, but it was certainly unseemly as president-elect. And the New York Times came out and indicated that 86% of people who invested in the currency lost money. So it's a really strange time. And I think it goes back to end of empire. We are seeing the insanity, the corruption in government that Rome had in 300 and 400 AD. And if you look back, none of the leaders then cast any shadow whatsoever. We don't remember who these people were because they were so meaningless. And I think the same thing is going to happen 50 or 100 years from now.
Yes, strange times indeed. And so, sir, if we are talking about the US stock market, so the valuations historically look insane, really. What would be your take on this whole stock market situation? And do you believe there will be some sort of normalization of these valuations in a slow way or a rapid way?
All things deviate from the mean and regress to the mean. And there's nothing in the economy that supports all-time highs in the stock market. And in fact, there's only 7 stocks that are moving the stock market. They represent 40% of the value of the stock market. And that's so much concentration in such a narrow area that it's exceptionally dangerous. And Nvidia is collapsing now, and it could easily take the entire stock market with it. When the stock markets crash, they do it suddenly. There's lots of warning in advance, but then all of a sudden it falls off a cliff, and everybody realizes that there's a lot of danger to it. And I certainly I believe there's going to be a stock market crash between the now and the end of October.
Okay, that's a very interesting take. And if we talk about gold, so gold has performed quite well. And if you look at the macro picture, I mean, a lot of things go in its favor with the deglobalization, with central banks getting involved and everything. What's your take, Bob, on the current price of gold, and where do you believe it could head in the next, let's say, short term and the long term as well?
Well, that's an excellent question. First of all, I was buying gold in the 1960s at $35 an ounce. So I look at $3,500 an ounce gold and say that's patently absurd. Now, there's a lot of people talking about repression and suppression of gold, and gold is manipulated. Now, I do something that a lot of readers hate, but I think it's very important. The question is far more important than the answer. Is gold manipulated?
Well, I have no idea personally.
Okay, well, that's a good, fair answer. Okay, and I will concede, yes, absolutely, gold is manipulated. But the most important question, and the valid question is, are there any financial markets that are not manipulated? And the answer to that is no. So to say gold is manipulated is just as meaningful as saying the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. It doesn't mean anything whatsoever. Now, there's a guy in Australia who runs a website called Gold Charts Are Us, and he actually will give people a 30-day or a 15-day free trial. And he does hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of charts. And he has some charts with metals percentage growth, and he tracks 9 metals. He's got iron, he's got aluminum, he's got lead, he's got zinc, he's got copper, he's got silver, he's got gold, I think he's got platinum. And of the 9 metals, you can go all the way back to 1900. Gold has gone up more than every other metal. So actually, in relative terms, gold is very high. But gold as a financial investment is an anti-dollar bet. Okay. If you believe there is no future for the dollar, and if you believe that most assets are overblown, like the stock market and the cryptocurrencies, it is the safest because it's the most real investment you can make. Now, I talk about gold as the ultimate insurance policy against financial chaos, and I believe that's true. And I remember going back to 1990, where somebody said, if you believe that there's a 10% chance of financial chaos, you should invest 10% of your money into gold or into gold assets. And I listened to that and I thought about it. I thought that makes a lot of sense. So I put 100% of my assets into gold and gold related investments.
Okay, you made some really, really good points. And what about silver, Bob? So if we look historically, silver usually performs quite well near the latter stages of the bull market. So what would your view be on silver?
Okay, you just made an excellent point. Now, the difference between silver and gold is like dancing. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. When the bull market starts, it always starts with gold. It always starts with the major mining companies. But eventually, silver gets to lead too. And at the end of a bull market, silver's going to roar. I've written a couple of financial books that are available on Lulu and Amazon. And I say that if you want to make money, you want to buy what's cheap and sell what's dear. And if you compare gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and rhodium, the cheapest metal by far is silver. And I have a lot of silver, and I'm a big believer. And a lot of people are saying silver's about to break out. I think that's true. You cannot have gold at 100 times what it was 40 years ago and have silver at 25 or 30 times what it was back then. All things regress from the mean, or all things deviate from the mean and regress to the mean. The relationship between gold and silver will make silver go up more than gold or go down less than gold.
Yes, I'm personally very much interested in silver as well. I have been stacking for many, many years. And so, Bob, talking about the miners, so you're bullish on the miners, and of course, the good companies at the current prices, they're doing really well. They're printing cash. The free cash flow looks really good with the Nikos, the new ones. But would there be a certain stage on the Lassonde curve that maybe you would be more interested at the current stage of the bull market?
Yes. Okay. And there's several stocks that I'm looking at that are right in the about to go to the first peak. Okay. If you're going to invest long term, you want to invest at the after the first peak as companies are about to go into production. But there's so much opportunity. You've done an interview with Rick Rule, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, Rick Rule says that historically, 3% of stock market assets are in metals. And right now, only 0.5% is. So literally, the resource stocks could go up fivefold just to get back to the mean. And in fact, they will not go up fivefold. They'll go up 10 or 20 or 30-fold, and they will overshoot. But if you go back to 1929, I think 28% of the stock market was in resource stocks. So I think based on things being cheap, that the resource stocks in general, and that would include oil, it would include copper, it would include uranium, certainly gold and silver, is the opportunity, not of a lifetime. I think it's the opportunity of 100-year span.
Yes, I'm certainly not hearing anyone around me talking about gold, and never mind the minor stocks. I actually think, Bob, I've never met a real person who was interested in the mining stocks. So that's a good contrarian sign as well.
Well, I am a contrarian. You just raised a really good point. When nobody wants to get into a particular market, that's when you want to get in. And when everybody wants to get into that market, that's when you want to get out. I make the point that you don't have to know anything about the economy or interest rates or the Fed or the stock market or Bitcoin. If you understand human psychology and contrarian thinking, invest in what everybody hates. When everybody loves it, then you sell. And right now, everybody loves the cryptocurrencies and everybody loves the stock market. And that's a giant signal to me that says they are sales. And like Rick Rule, I agree. You know, if you've got something that traditionally was 3% of the economy and now it's 0.5% of the economy, that's a good deal. I'll tell you how bad it is. I used to carry a US $20 gold piece around with me. And I went to a gold show and I was talking to the president of a fairly important resource company that was based in South America. And I pulled the coin out for some reason to make a point. And he said, "Oh, let me look at that." And he picked it up and he said, "You know, I've never actually seen one of these before." And I thought, wait a minute, here's the guy whose business is producing gold, and he's never seen a gold coin. Okay, how bizarre is that?
Yes, that's that's very interesting. And so, Bob, I would like to ask you about a few of the other commodities. So things like copper, uranium. What would your view be on these?
I think that the measure that people should use is the commodity real? The very best test of that investment is to hold a bar of copper or uranium or silver or gold and drop it. And if it hurts your foot, it's a good investment.
Okay, well, you definitely wouldn't want to hold uranium, but yes, I certainly agree with your point. If it's needed by the world, then it's easier to build a belief or a foundational idea of where you believe it could be going. So thanks for that, Bob. So my next question would be around portfolio structure in the current environment. Um, how would you be looking at structured portfolio with everything that's happening right now? Would it just be gold and mining companies, or do you believe maybe a little bit of diversification could be useful?
That's going to vary based on each person and what their goals are. As far as gold and silver, platinum, palladium, and rhodium, I believe there's two purposes to it. One is as an investment, and the other is as an insurance policy against financial chaos. Uh, if you look at something like rhodium, which used to be virtually impossible to buy, but somebody's come out with rhodium coins now and you can actually buy them. Rhodium got to $10,000 an ounce in 2008. And by 2011 and 2012, it had dropped to about $700 or $800 an ounce. And for that kind of a decline in excess of 90%, I was touting rhodium. And I don't make any money out of going out saying rhodium is a good investment, but I give advice to people, and since rhodium had gone down far more than the other metals, I suggested rhodium. Well, rhodium went from $700 or $800 an ounce to $28,000 an ounce. Platinum was discovered by the Europeans around 1725 or 1735 in Colombia. And traditionally, platinum has held a premium to gold. Well, platinum's about 1,300 today, and gold's about 3,350 today. So platinum could almost triple to get to where it's been traditionally in the past. Silver hit a high of $50.25 on January 21st of 1980, and it's hovering just above $38 an ounce today. So if you buy things when they're cheap and you sell them where they're dear, I think you can make money.
Yes, and with platinum, it's also that most of the production comes from three countries where the political situation is far from being good. So that's another, I suppose, possibility on the for a squeeze.
Okay, now help me out. You just said something interesting. I know two of the countries are Russia and South Africa. Who would be the third country?
I think it's Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, it could be. It's just not something. I'll tell you something substantially above 95 or 96% would come from Russia and South Africa, and of course, South Africa is a basket case. Zimbabwe is a basket case. Uh, Russia produces a lot of platinum, but they're not producing it at the premium they used to. They're actually the relationship between platinum and palladium. I can remember when palladium was $46 an ounce, when platinum was $1,000 an ounce. So there's lots of opportunity within the metals. To buy and sell things. I think a very safe investment right now would be to sell gold and buy silver, because gold is clearly expensive and silver is clearly cheap. And I think I'm not sure what the ratio is. I think the ratio is about 90 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold. But traditionally, I looked into it once. I did the math. Uh, in the last 100 years, the ratio is averaged at 53 to 1. Now, silver was part of the U.S. monetary system until 1965. The last silver coins were made dated 1964. The ratio back then was about 17 to 1. It's gotten as high as 130 to 1 in 2020, and it's about 90 to 1 now. I think that owning silver and selling gold would be a relatively safe investment, but buying what is cheap and selling what's expensive always works.
Makes total sense. So Bob, I like to ask this question for the younger audience. So if we have an individual who's still at the beginning of their wealth building path, they have so many options with the Bitcoins, with Nvidias, with the things that we're talking about, the precious metal sector. What advice would you have for that individual on how they could, kick off their wealth building path?
Strange enough, the most valuable thing they could do is read a book. And the book would be called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it was written about 1850. And it's a very poorly written book, and it's a very boring book, and it talks about 30 chapters of the insanity of people. They talk about the South Sea India craze. They talk about the tulip bulb craze. But the fact of the matter is, if you will read that book and you will understand that basically people are dumber than bricks, okay? So if you could figure out what everybody is doing, what the mob is doing, and do the opposite, you will profit. Okay, now that's absolutely outrageous to say, but the smartest investors I've ever seen all believed in extraordinary popular delusions and the madness crowds. And I've written a book, short book that can be read in 2 hours, called "Nobody Knows Anything." And the entire book is about that point. When you understand that there are no experts and there are no gurus, don't be following the crowd, okay? Do exactly the opposite of what the crowd is doing. It is more important to be a contrarian than to know economics.
Yes, I have never heard of that book, so I will definitely have a look. Thank you very much for that. And Bob, what would be the best advice that you have received that had the biggest influence on your investment career when you were younger and less experienced?
Strange enough, I had an exceptionally unusual career. I graduated from high school when I was 17. I went to work in a garage, and I was running a gas station in San Mateo. I turned 18. I decided I would hitchhike back to Texas and go to college because my parents had always told me if you're going to have a decent job, you have to go to college. I got as far as Salt Lake City and I ran out of money. And this was in 1964. And American young men faced the draft. And I thought, well, I'll just join the Marine Corps and get it over with. So I joined the Marine Corps. I did very well. Uh, the United States was gearing up for the war in Vietnam. So I applied for flight training. I got into flight training. I started when I was 18. I got my wings when I was 20. So I was competing with a lot of college grads, and virtually everyone that I flew with had some college. It was exceptionally rare not to have any college at all. And I had no college. I'd never been on a college campus. So I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, including 20 months in Vietnam. And then I got out and I thought, well, I need to go back and go to college. So I went to the University of Texas and it bored me. So I went to Southern Methodist, okay, and it was a big party school, but they had some exceptional courses. They had one course, sociology course, based on comparative religions. And you had to study all of the religions of the world. And that's something that's just really interesting and would certainly change your attitude about Muslims or Jews or Christians or Buddhists. And another one was a course on, I'm trying to think what you'd call it. It wasn't a course on investing, it was a course on living, where we had to study the war on drugs. We had to study extraordinary popular delusions and the madness crowds. What the SMU was trying to do was broaden the education of the students who were going there, and it was a required course. But the single best book that I've ever read in my life was Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And once you realize how stupid people are, I mean, you and I were talking about it off camera about the war in Ukraine, and it doesn't make any difference which side you're on. It is a stupid war. It is being fought for no purpose whatsoever. It should have never occurred in the first place. And you've got these idiots massacring each other. And how can that be a good thing? And the answer is it can't be a good thing. I was in a war for 20 months, and I know no one wins any war. The only thing that happens is one side loses a lot more than the other. Now, when we talk about war, we tend to talk about it as if it's a soccer match or a baseball game or a football game or a basketball game with one winner and one loser. But it's like walking into a bar, going up to the biggest guy in the bar, telling him that his girlfriend is so ugly, she looks like she fell out of an ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. Okay. So he knocks half your teeth out, but you bust his jaw. And the answer is who won? And the answer is nobody. Okay. Because you can't win a war. You can only survive a war. So extraordinary popular delusions and the madness crowds. Once you accept the fact that people are irrational, they're poorly led by sociopaths, you realize, wait a minute, I'm going to have to think for myself and I'm going to have to make my own decision. Man is a herd animal. If you've ever been fishing and seen a school of fish swimming together. You're just wondering, how do these guys understand what to do? If you see the same thing with the flock of birds, how can you have 10,000 birds in a formation and they're going like this and they know what they're doing? But man, it's a herd animal. And like rhinoceroses and giraffes and sheep, if they're being attacked, okay, they want to stick together. Well, as an investor, you don't want to stick together. You want to do exactly the opposite. And you got to read the book to understand that.
Really, really good points. Thank you very much for that. So these are all the questions I had. Is there anything else that's maybe on your mind that we haven't mentioned?
We live at the most dangerous period in world history. We have two conflicts going on, either of which could go nuclear very, very quickly, neither of which does anything positive for the world. And I wish in the book that I was talking about, The Fourth Turning, the authors talk about that you're going to have this interesting situation where you're going to have governments and institutions going to totalitarianism, and you're going to have green shoots of independence at the same time. And I'm seeing the green shoots of independence at the same time. I'm seeing a few leaders, and I mean leaders as opposed to people running the show, uh, and I'd like to see a lot more. We have so many important situations that we need to solve peacefully that it's time for the real leaders to float to the surface and start doing something. If you go back to the American Revolutionary War, the signers of the Declaration of Independence had an average age of 26. Okay. So I am looking for young people to step up, and I'll be totally candid. My generation has just totally screwed the world financially. And I know a lot of young people, and they realize something is wrong and they're trying to change it. And I hope they succeeded.
Yes. So again, sir, thank you very much for being here. I really enjoyed the conversation and I hope to have you back.
Thank you.